Howard, thank you for your time. Why are you seriously thinking about running for president?
Well, what I've said throughout the week is that I'm seriously considering running for president as a centrist independent. And if I do, I'd run as an American under one banner, the American flag. The reason I'm so concerned about the country and the profound issues facing the American people is two issues. One, we have a president of the United States that I believe is unqualified to be president and needs to be removed. I want to do everything I possibly can to see him get out of office. And then I think there's a much bigger problem that goes far beyond President Trump, and that is, for many, many years, a demonstration by the extremes of both parties of an unwillingness to compromise, to remove their ideology and their self-interest and self-preservation in a way that would give access to solving very complex problems. The national debt, which is $21.5 trillion, immigration issues, education issues, our healthcare crisis, all of these things, as well as our standing in the world, are very serious issues facing the American people and our kids and our grandkids. And I've come to the conclusion that a Democrat in the White House in 2020, if that would be the case, would re-elect Donald Trump, because I don't think a Democrat would get elected.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the reaction to the possibility of your candidacy. What do you make of the reaction that seemingly has been critical?
Well, I think we expected that we would get blowback from the Democratic Party because I think they're threatened by the fact that perhaps I would take votes away from a Democratic candidate if I decide to run. But the truth is, it's kind of a false narrative, because we've done the work to really understand the theory of the case. So if I can I try and describe it? First off, approximately 42% of the American electorate identify themselves as an independent. 30% are registered and 12% are affiliated as an independent. But they've never had a legitimate choice before. Secondarily, I strongly believe that there are lifelong Republicans who are looking for a home, who do not want to vote for Donald Trump for re-election, but will not vote for a progressive, left-minded, liberal Democrat. So I believe Democrats and Republicans, if given an opportunity of a legitimate choice. And the other question is, what better expression of our democracy than providing the American people with a better choice? So the choice is really clear. Embrace the status quo of broken politics, ideology, and self-interest, which will lead to further decline and all the problems that I've mentioned. Or perhaps a reimagination of a new way. And what better reimagination than sitting here in Seattle, a city that is steeped in innovation, a city of entrepreneurship, and I've built my career here, and I think there's a better opportunity.
And I want to I'll touch back on Seattle in a bit, but by running as an independent, you're getting out of competitive primaries likely in Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina. Are you taking the easy way out?
Oh, I can assure you this is not the easy way. I mean, this is probably the hardest way possible to consider running for president. But going back to the theory of the case is the Democratic National Committee and the Republican National Committee make it almost impossible for an independent person to run for president. In view of that, we've done the work, and I can say unequivocally that if we do run for president, we will be on the ballot of every state. And why that is so vitally important is, for the last 30 years, presidential election cycles have been decided by battleground states, almost 8 to 10 states, that's it. If I enter the race, it'll be a 50-state race of 3 different people running, a Democrat, a Republican, and an independent.
But does part of you worry that you may split the Democrat vote and potentially then get Donald Trump reelected, as some Democrats
Well, as I said, nobody wants to see Donald Trump removed from office more than me. I will not be a spoiler. And if we get down the road and the theory of the case doesn't apply, then we'll have another look. But I'm going to travel the country the next 3 months, doing everything I can to listen and learn from the American people, talk about my life history, my book, the fact that I grew up in public housing. I'm living proof of the American dream. I think that needs to be celebrated in America once again. I'm going to talk about my roots in Seattle and Starbucks being the first company in America to provide comprehensive health insurance, equity in the form of stock options, and free college tuition to all employees, including part-time people. That is steeped in Seattle and the Northwest roots of our culture and our values, and give the American people an opportunity to see if I can ignite a national movement around a better choice that would lead to renewal.
But we have right now someone with no political experience like yourself running the country. What makes you think you'd be better than a Donald Trump?
Well, I don't want to compare myself in any way to Donald Trump. You know, what I've done over the last almost 40 years is build a company that was just named the fifth most admired company in the world, and as I said, has shared success. I've spent my life serving people. I've spent my life understanding what it means to be that poor kid growing up in the projects. I understand the most important asset of perhaps understanding what it means to be in that Oval Office, and that is restoring dignity and trust and civility back into the office, of demonstrating true leadership, of bringing the country together and restoring our standing in the world, and suggesting to the American people, as this president has, that we should be divided, that we should be isolated, that we should build walls. No. This country should not be building walls. We should be building bridges. We should not be in a trade war with China. We should have not taken our troops out of Syria. We should have not insulted NATO. And this president, day in and day out, insults every possible person, as well as not having the humility of respecting the advice and counsel of his advisors. Donald Trump needs to go, and I'm going to try and make the case for the American people that our system of government, Republican and Democrat, on the extreme left and right, is doing everything possible not to represent what is in the interest of the American people. A great example is immigration. 75% of the American people for years have been asking for, longing for, and they deserve an immigration bill of comprehensive immigration reform. Why can't we get it? We can't get it because the extreme right and the extreme left, that does not represent the majority of Americans, but they're the silent majority, can't get it done. And one issue after another, and all I'm saying is I think something is seriously wrong with our government. And our government is not trusted, our leaders are not trusted, our government isn't working for us, and I think there's a better way.
So let's talk a little bit more about issues. Starbucks is famous for providing health care coverage for its workers. Given your commitment to health insurance, and since you've already ruled out Medicare for all, what would President Schultz do to ensure access to health care for all?
Well, what I believe very strongly, especially given my history of a young boy who watched his family lose health insurance, and then giving all Starbucks employees comprehensive health insurance, is I believe that every American deserves the right to affordable health care, without a doubt. Now, the Affordable Care Act and what President Obama did was the right thing to do. 30 million people are now insured, but we got to go back in and we got to fix the fact that premiums have gone up. Then we need to bring pharma to the table, and we need to have transparency with them, and the government needs to negotiate with them, that we have not been able to do, on making sure there's transparency specifically with regard to pharmaceutical issues, pharmaceutical drugs. In addition to that, corporations in America need to have more skin in the game. And I would be the kind of person that would persuade corporations across the country to understand that we have a moral obligation and responsibility to do more for our people and the communities that we serve. And Starbucks is not a proxy for every company, but we can demonstrate that we have been providing health insurance for over 25 years, and it has not been an expense. It's been an investment in our people. Our stock price is up 24,000% since 1992. I think there's a way to do both. And I think what people are suggesting on the far left, and that's why I can't run as a Democrat, is free college tuition, a free government job for everybody, and a $32 trillion proposal on free Medicare for everybody. It just doesn't work.
I want to ask it about another issue here. You're not a stranger to the debate over firearms and guns. Do you support stricter gun control?
What I support is the Second Amendment. I've got great respect for people who use guns for sports and for hunting. I think the question that we should be asking ourselves is, in a society like ours, should there be weapons of war that is accessible to people to buy. And I think we got to take a very hard look at that. And so I respect the Second Amendment. I wouldn't do anything to change it, but I think the question we should ask ourselves, what kind of country do we want to live in, and should weapons of war be part of our society? I think not.
I want to talk a little bit about your impact in Seattle and the work you've done in Seattle. It's been reported that Starbucks sent a message to baristas about how to handle your potential candidacy. Will your candidacy potentially hurt Starbucks?
Well, today I noticed that Starbucks had reached its all-time high stock price over a 27-year period. So certainly the market is making a decision that the things that I'm talking about and the things that I believe are not inconsistent with the values of the market cap of Starbucks. Kevin Johnson is the CEO of Starbucks. I'm not involved at all in the operations of Starbucks. I've left the company. He sent out a message I think that was appropriate, and that is Starbucks is not involved in politics or Howard's issues that he may or may not run for president. We wish him well, and I think that was the appropriate message. But the church and state issue between Starbucks and myself is completely separate.
Seattle Times reported that state and county election records show that going back to 2005, you had only cast a ballot in just 11 of 38 elections. It's a mail-in ballot in Washington. I know you're a very busy guy. Why didn't you vote?
Well, I voted in every presidential election since I was able to vote. And I've been traveling around the country and the world. I missed those votes. It wasn't in any way a slight against citizenship, but I voted in every presidential election.
I know that you want the support of this city, and if we're going to do that, we have to talk about the Sonics. So sure. Let's talk about the Sonics. In your book, you call it your biggest professional regret. Some people are saying, what took so long? What's your reaction?
Yeah. Well, this is, I think, a very difficult issue for me and the relationship I have with Seattle sports fans. I write about it with great humility and sadness, and I make a very deep apology. I think the lesson I've learned with regard to the Sonic situation is when you have power and responsibility, you need to show restraint. The complexity of that time in my life and the pressure I was under from other investors, I was dealing with a lot of different things that really doesn't matter because I was responsible. I made the decision, and I've got to pay the burden of that responsibility. I regret it. There's nothing I can do to bring the Sonics back. I naively thought that the people who bought the team would keep it here. That didn't happen, and ultimately I'm responsible. I make a formal apology with great humility. There's a town hall meeting tonight to talk about my book. I'm sure that subject's going to come up, and I will say these same kind of words that I believe in my heart, that it was a mistake. I apologize for it, and I'm sorry.
When did you know you made a mistake?
I think I knew maybe within a year when I started seeing young kids with Sonic jerseys on, and it really made me realize the deep wounds of taking a sport team away from young fans.
It's been 12 years. Do you think Seattle should just get over it?
Well, I think sports fans have a deep level of commitment, almost a religious experience with their sports teams, and I understand that. I have a similar feeling with the team, with the Yankees that I grew up with my dad. So I understand if people can't get over it. I'm doing everything I can to talk about it openly and honestly, and I apologize.
So a lot of people are still angry, as you've noted. You called it a public trust, and then you lost the public's trust. So why should Sonics fans still support your potential candidacy?
Well, because I think the country is in a very, very fragile position. When I think about America today, I think about people's children and grandchildren. The country's sitting with $21.5 trillion of debt, and we've got a broken education and healthcare system, along with a level of division and divisiveness in the country that I have certainly never seen in my lifetime. I think my life experience growing up as a poor kid on the other side of the tracks and living the American dream, I've got a great understanding and great empathy and compassion for the millions of Americans who are being left behind. When I read a statistic that says 40% or 50% of American families don't have $400 in the bank and are just a crisis away from insolvency, or 5 million young kids are not in school and not in work, and many are African American, Latino. So many people in America are food insecure. I was a kid when Jewish Family Services delivered food to my house because my parents didn't have enough money for food. I remember what that was like. I'm still kind of scarred by it. And so the short answer to your question is, I think I have the leadership skills and the understanding of what it's going to take to restore faith and confidence in the promise of the country and bring people together. And I apologize for what happened with the Sonics. There's not much I can do other than talk about it openly and honestly. But in terms of the country, we have serious issues that are going to require the kind of leadership to restore faith and confidence in the country.
Couple last questions on this because fans do want to hear from this. Time magazine said the sale of the Sonics was indicative of how you would govern potentially. You didn't get your way, you packed up the shop and sent what may be viewed as problems down the road. Do you agree with that assessment?
Well, I don't, because if you look at the fact that I've managed a public company for the last 26 years, and in doing so, Starbucks built about 30,000 stores in 77 countries and employed almost 400,000 people and built what Fortune magazine just named the 5th most admired company in the world. I've had a long track record of almost 30 years as a public CEO, bringing people together, solving complex problems, building a very diverse organization. I'm not perfect. Starbucks isn't perfect. I'm human. I made a mistake. I've learned from that mistake. But what we're talking about right now is the future of the country and America's standing in the world. And I know we can do better. And I know in my heart that President Trump needs to go, and that our broken political system that is steeped in ideology and self-interest on both extremes will not bring the country together.
My last question on this, would you ever take part in an effort, would you ever invest trying to bring basketball back to this city?
Oh, I would do whatever was asked of me to bring a basketball team back to Seattle. No one has solicited my opinion, as you might imagine, but I think it'd be wonderful for the city of Seattle, and I'm confident, especially given the enthusiasm on the Sounders and the new level of issues in terms of how embracing the city and the city government has been about the hockey team, that there will be a day, hopefully sooner than later, when a basketball team from the NBA comes back.
Let's go back to the president. President Trump tweeted, Howard Schultz doesn't have the guts to run for president. Watched him on 60 Minutes, and I agree with him that he's not the smartest person. Besides, America already has that. I only hope that Starbucks is still paying me their rent in the Trump Tower. Two parts. Are you still paying rent in the Trump Tower?
Well, I'm not, because I'm not part of Starbucks, but Starbucks has had stores in Trump properties. The interesting thing about Trump properties is in many of those properties, he really doesn't have equity or ownership in it. He just licensed his name. It's part of his whole thing. But yes, Starbucks does have stores in some of Trump.
What do you think of his tweet?
I'm exhausted and bored by those tweets. I'm not doing this to win a Twitter primary, and I think he should spend a lot more time thinking about the people who are being left behind in this country and focus on what's really important.
I want to end with just a couple of quick issue-based questions. Thoughts on the border wall?
The wall?
On the border wall.
Well, having been in Arizona yesterday, which is a border state, I was very clear when I said I agree with the Republicans that we need very strong, very stiff border security. And sitting in Seattle with some of the best tech companies in the world, as well as some people that I know very well around the country, I am so confident that it's not a wall that we need or any kind of physical structure. What we need is leveraging technology which exists to prevent bad people from coming into this country. What we do not need, and what I don't agree with the Republicans on, is we do not in any way should be stripping mothers from their babies and putting children in internment camps. Going back to the Republicans, I agree with them that we need ICE and we need people at the border, securing our border with tough security. And I certainly agree with the Democrats that the Dreamers who have been here for years deserve an opportunity to become citizens. They should not be sent back. It would, in my view, be inhumane. But this is a perfect example, I think. This is the proxy for why I am here today, is that 75, almost 80% of the American people agree we need stiff, strong border. We should do that, not a wall. And we need a sense of humanity with regard to immigration reform. And to me, it's so sensible and seems like so easy if you had people in the room who were not steeped in ideology, not the extremes on the far right and the far left, and represented the majority of the Americans who want to see immigration reform. Also, immigration is the history of America. Every one of us is here because someone came before us and was an immigrant. My great-grandfather came from Poland in 1896 with $10 in his pocket. He was a tailor. Why did he come here? Because of the magnetism, the promise, the idea of America, the gift of America. We should not be building walls. We should be building bridges and bringing great people into the country who could add value to our society. And we have to honor who we have been.
What's your plan with North Korea?
Plan with North Korea, this is another issue for me where I think the president's gotten it so wrong. First off, I would not have given Kim Jong-un any opportunity to be on stage with the President of the United States. He doesn't deserve that position. And then we get into a trade and a tariff war with China, and we need China's cooperation and help in negotiating an opportunity to put North Korea in a place where their nuclear arms are put away, and we need China to help us do that. So what do we do instead? We get into a massive trade and tariff war with China with no end game, no strategy. It results in a consumer tax on goods and services for Americans here. And if you're in the agricultural business, you have to be and you're a farmer in Iowa, you've lost markets that are never coming back. And now we have lost the opportunity, in my view, to create the level of statesmanship and diplomacy and the kind of leadership we need to cooperate with China, not only on North Korea, but climate change, and with what is in our national interest is to create an opportunity to cooperate with China. China is not an enemy of America. China is a fierce competitor, and we need their help with regard to North Korea.
As we sit here this morning, you've been at it for only a couple of days. How sure are you that you're going to run for president?
I'm not sure. You know, what I said on 60 Minutes, and I'll repeat, is that I'm going to spend the next few months seriously considering whether or not I run for president as a centrist independent. I love America. I'm profoundly where we are. I want to make a difference, and I can assure you of one thing. I want to do everything humanly possible to get Donald Trump out of the Oval Office. He is not qualified to be the President of the United States.
I'll end with this. If elected, will Starbucks be the official coffee of the U.S. government?
That'll be a decision that somebody in protocol will have to decide. Good question, though.
Thank you, Howard. Anything else that you'd like to add about your potential candidacy or the week that's been?
I think for me, I've spent a lot of time thinking this through before I went on 60 Minutes. And what I was really thinking about is my children and my grandchildren and what kind of country we want for them. And I believe we are better than this. And I believe the American people are better than our current political class. And this requires a level of leadership to kind of ask the important questions. And the important question is we can do better. The question is how we're going to get there. And I think the better way is to disrupt the system and reimagine a new government.